Are We There Yet? By Alison Lester. Starting out. The year I turned 8, Mum and Dad took us on a trip around Australia. Luke, Billy, and I missed school for the whole winter term. Nan and Papa stayed behind to look after Buffy and Tigger and Bess. We towed Papa's old camper trailer, and it was our home for 3 months. It folded out to make a little house with a table, a fridge, 2 double beds, a stove and a sink. It had everything we needed. Luke slept in his swag under the stars, except when it rained, and then he bunked in with us. We were squashed, but it was cosy. The day we left, I helped Nan pin up a big map of Australia so she and Papa could follow our journey. "I wish I was coming, Grace," Nan said as she hugged me tight. "I'm going to miss our cuddles." On the road at last. I waved to Nan and Papa until Dad turned onto the road leading out to the highway. I felt sad and excited at the same time. Nobody said anything for ages until we reached the coast. We saw the last autumn leaves fluttering like flags on the grapevines of the Barossa Valley. Then, at the Coorong, Luke made us laugh. "Look," he said, "a pelican! Its beak can hold more than its belly can." On our first night, we camped on the edge of the Flinders Ranges. It felt like we were the only people in the world. At Streaky Bay, we stuck our heads in the mouth of a great white shark. We made letters with our shadows at Murphy's haystacks. The giant boulders glowed in the afternoon sun. That evening at the camping ground, Mum said Billy had to use the women's bathrooms because he was still little. He was embarrassed. "Okay," he said, "but if anyone comes in, call me Kylie." We drove past the wheat silos and windmills, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" It took us 2 days to cross the Nullarbor Plain. I waved to the people in passing cars and trucks, and they always waved back. We all had our favourite positions in the car. The Great Australian Bight looked like a giant had bitten a huge chunk out of Australia. Dad and Luke stood right on the edge of the cliff, but Mum stayed back. She held on to Billy and me so tight that my hand went numb. "Ooh," she said, "I can't look." At head of Bight, we saw 10 whales in the sea below us. A mother and her calf were rolling and wallowing together. Their mournful music sounded like an underwater orchestra. "It's making me sleepy," I said to Mum. "They must be singing a whale lullaby." Over the desert and into the west. At Ikula, we had sandy sandwiches near the ruins of the old telegraph station. The next day, we travelled for nearly 150 kilometres on a dead straight road. Dad pretended to drive with his eyes closed, but I could tell he was peeping. Luke surfed on a stone at Wave Rock, but Dad waited for the real waves at Rottnest Island. The quokkas came so close to me, I could see their tiny whiskers. After Perth, we went to see the pinnacles. They poked up through the sand like giant limestone fingers. It was so windy at Geraldton that the trees grew sideways. We drove past a pink tapestry of wildflowers, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" The further north we travelled, the hotter it became. We stood in the shadows at Monkey Mia to see the dolphins. "Too crowded," said Dad. "I liked it better when it was just us and the whales." Mum made me wear my hat all the time. "Hats and sunscreen," she'd say every time we stopped. "This sun will burn you to a crisp." That afternoon, Mum and Billy and I had a picnic in the dunes, then fell asleep like a pride of lions. Later, when we went for a dip, a dolphin came up close and swam right between us. We went snorkelling at Turquoise Bay. A gentle current carried us over the coral reef, as though the ocean was giving us a tour. There were so many fish, like sparkling jewels. My favourites were the tiny blue angels. The Outback. At Broome, we ate crunchy fish and chips and watched the moon reflected in the mudflats at Roebuck Bay. It's called the Staircase to the Moon. The next day, we camped at Winjana Gorge. Mum loved the boab trees. They look like opera singers, she said. Dad and Luke called them upside-down trees. We flew over the bungles in a helicopter without any doors, and my stomach turned inside out. I can't look, said Mum again. At Tunnel Creek, we waded through an underground river. The dark water came right up to my armpits. When something slimy slithered past my leg, I screamed. Luke said, "Don't be such a sook." Heading south on the Tanami track, the sand was so deep our car got bogged. Everyone felt hot and grouchy, and Mum was worried we'd be stranded in the desert. Luke found a tiny thorny devil, standing fierce as a dragon, and that cheered us up. A football team helped push us out, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" At Alice Springs, we stayed with Mum's friend Ruth. The days were hot, but the nights were freezing. Luke and Billy played footy with some of the local boys. That afternoon, we drove out to see Uluru. Dad spotted it first, when we were still 35 kilometres away. "Wow," he said, "that's a big rock." At sunset, we watched its colour fade to purple. Ruth took us to her school and a teacher showed Mum and me how to dig for witchetty grubs. They tasted like egg yolk, runny and delicious, with a crunchy head and wriggly legs. Mum wouldn't try one. "No, thank you," she said. "I'm still full from breakfast." We hiked between the round red domes of Catachuta. The trees whispered to us as we walked through the Valley of the Winds. Uluru is the heart of Australia. A huge red heart right in the middle of the country. One day we got up early in the cool of the morning and walked around the rock. I felt as tiny as an ant. The top end. We floated down Catherine Gorge, below the towering Orca cliffs. "This is the life," said Dad. "Just wake me up if we come to a waterfall." We drifted slowly that even a tortoise swam past us. We stayed with our cousins in Darwin and played in their shady pool until we were as wrinkled as prunes. At nights, the ceiling fans whirred constantly overhead. Even a sheet felt hot. Tiny grey geckos hunted insects on the walls. Mum and I loved the market and Mindil Beach. There was so much yummy food, it was hard to choose. We ate satay prawns and drank mango smoothies as we watched the sun set. We drove across the floodplains, past Egrets and Jabiru. And Billy said, "Are we there yet?" At Kakadu, we went on a billabong cruise. The boat drew so close to one enormous crocodile that I could count its teeth. We swam at Gunlom, where there were no saltwater crocodiles. The water was cool and silky. Dad kept diving underwater and grabbing my feet, and even though I knew it was him, I screamed every time. Luke caught a huge fish in the East Alligator River. It was so big, we invited all the other campers to Luke's Barramundi barbecue. Tony, our Kakadu guide, led us through galleries of rock art. The sandstone overhangs were alive with animals, handprints and spirits from the dream time. Some of the paintings were more than 20,000 years old. One small handprint looked just like mine. The far north. As we travelled on the Barkly Highway, we caught up with a big mob of cattle. We stopped to share our cool water with the dusty drovers, and the boss let me ride his horse for a little way. Taffy was the same colour as Bess and just as gentle, but twice as tall. Near Cloncurry, the flying doctor's plane flew over us. We invented patience for him, and Luke had the best idea. a drover who got bucked off his horse and landed on a spiny anteater. At the circus at Mount Isa, an elephant ate my horrible hat. She swiped it off my head with her trunk and scoffed it. "Thank you, elephant," I shouted. Dad bought me a new hat at the Mariba Rodeo. "You look like a real cowgirl, Gracie," said Mum. We met an old stockman who taught us how to crack a whip. He showed Luke how to twist the cracker. That night, Billy and I rode our broncos until they couldn't buck any more. The next morning, we drove through the shadowy green rainforest, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" In far north Queensland, we walked beside the Daintree River. Giant butterflies landed on Mum's blue t-shirt. "They think you're a beautiful flower, Mum," said Billy. Luke found a snake-shaped piece of mangrove wood. He carved it into a walking stick for Popper. "I can't look," said Mum again. The Great Barrier Reef was a swirling underwater carnival of fish and coral. We went beach combing at Cow Bay, where the jungle came right up to the sand. Mum and I made a shell mermaid together. "When the tide comes in tonight, she'll swim out to sea," said Dad. I imagined her out there riding her dolphin like an ocean cowgirl. Heading south. In Cairns, we spent all our time at the pool. One day, Mum crashed into Billy on the water slide and got banned for the whole afternoon. At Hitchinbrook Island, we hiked for hours to swim at Mulligan Falls. That evening, we were so tired and sore, we all needed a back rub. We left the coast and drove inland to visit our friend at Miles. We all helped on the farm, and Luke had a go at shearing. The sheep looked skinny and embarrassed without their wool. At Surfers Paradise, we rode on a scary bungee ride. "Ugh," moaned Dad as it catapulted up. "I can't look." But Mum laughed as she spun above the lights. "I can look," she shouted. Later that week, we caught heaps of fish off the jetty at Forster. Boats skimmed across the sea as we drove down the coast, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" When we got to Sydney, we parked our van in Uncle Pete's garden. The next day at the zoo, a baby elephant stared hungrily at my hat, so I ran. "No way!" I yelled. "I like this hat." One day, we went bushwalking in the Blue Mountains. Oil evaporating from the eucalyptus trees makes a blue haze. Mum and I imagined the kind of clothes the three sisters would wear. Uncle Pete's dog Bongo towed Luke all the way along Bondi Beach. Our last night in Sydney, we had a picnic overlooking the harbour. Cascading fireworks exploded across the sky and their reflections shimmered on the water. It felt like a farewell display just for us. The cold country. On our way to the mountains, we stopped at Canberra and spent a whole day visiting galleries. Mum and I always liked the same paintings. Billy made a Ned Kelly helmet at Glenrowan. "Bail up," he said. "I'm a bushranger." Winter arrived in the south, and it was freezing at Mount Hotham. Billy and Luke and I had never seen snow before. We caught snowflakes in our mouths and wore socks on our hands to keep them warm. We crossed Bass Strait on a big red ferry. The sea was so rough we all felt sick. Luke turned pale green. In the Hobart Museum, we saw a stuffed Tasmanian tiger. I felt so sad to think they were extinct. Mum tried to cheer me up. "You never know, Gracie," she said. "There might still be a tiger family in the bush." When we went hiking at Cradle Mountain, I kept a lookout for tiger tracks. It rained so much, we played Monopoly for hours. Luke always won, even when Dad and Billy and I ganged up on him. At the end of the week, we drove back onto the ferry, and Billy said, "Are we there yet?" Wilson's Promontory is the most southerly part of the Australian mainland. I found a paper nautilus tree, washed ashore at Squeaky Beach. One evening at Phillip Island, we watched little penguins surf the shore, then waddle up the beach like tiny explorers. Melbourne was crowded and fast after camping at night on the beach. The traffic noise kept me awake at night. We learnt to juggle at St Kilda. On the last day of our trip, Dad got us up early. As we drove away from the city, I looked back at the dawn through sleepy eyes. Winding along the Great Ocean Road, we stopped to look at the 12 apostles standing on the surf. The sea was wild and foaming, and we were nearly home. Finally, we were back at our house. Buffy was so pleased to see us, she jumped right into the car. I cuddled Tigger and called out to Bess. It was good to hear her whinny back. Billy woke up and said, "Are we there yet?" And we were. We were home.